Hey, everybody. I'm going to be responding to a listener's comment today, and I think I've got time now to do a few of these every week where I'm responding to a comment. And I'm doing this because I think if one person has a question, probably 1,000 people have that same question. And if one person says something kind of really obnoxious, probably 1,000 people have had someone say that same obnoxious thing to them. So it might help us all to process these things together. And I want to do more of these because it's just fun to interact with my listeners. And this is a way to do it. I do want to hear what people are thinking. So today I'm responding to a comment that someone left on my video about Trump and the Epstein files a couple days ago. And I've got several that I plan to respond to from that video alone. And admittedly, today I am picking sort of an outrageous comment because it's a Friday night and I think we could all use a little levity. But I promise that most of them will be more substantive than this one. And they won't all be from people who disagree with me either. Just anything that I think somebody brings up where we could actually learn something from it. I just want to respond to it. So this one at least made me laugh. So I did appreciate that. And it does give me the opportunity to respond to a certain kind of comment that I hear quite a bit, which is basically prove your claims. So if you didn't see that video, I basically said this just for the context. At this point in time, I said it's become obvious that Trump is covering up the Epstein files, but none of us know exactly why he's doing that. And I recorded the video right after I watched a group of Epstein and Maxwell survivors speak in front of the Capitol. And my main point was to call Christians who support Trump to account for aiding and abetting Trump's cover-up. And I said, we don't need a conspiracy theory to know everything we need to know about Trump's attitude towards sexual abuse. And he's told us with his own words, and he was found liable for that by a jury. And my final point was that I don't know why he's pressuring Congress to block release of the files. I don't know if he's protecting himself or someone else, or if he just finds it politically inconvenient to have them released. But that no matter the reason, he did in this situation what he always does when he has power. He victimized somebody. And in this case, he re-victimized those Epstein survivors by continuing to use the word hoax right after they publicly begged him not to. So that's the context. And so this commenter responded to that, "Oh, boo-hoo, prove your claims, get a life." And so, yeah, I don't want to pile on the commenter. That's not the point. But I do have to say publicly that it's very cruel to use the phrase boo-hoo about a video that deals with an issue like that. I mean, I have to say that to him, and I hope that he considers it. And that leads me to the first point that I want to make. I've been told in the past that sometimes it's hurtful when I repeat the things that people say in the comments, that basically I'm platforming these sorts of words. And I take that seriously, and I wouldn't repeat everything there's a lot of stuff that people say that I would never repeat. And there's some where I just hide the comment because I don't think anybody needs to see that. So I don't care what this guy might say to me personally. I don't get offended very easily at all by things that people say to me personally. But I do want to say on behalf of those victims, this is terrible. I want to call out every comment like this that would minimize their pain. And I'm guessing, that this particular commenter is probably a 9-year-old, based on the punctuation and the vocabulary. So I'm not going to be too hard on him. But I do hope that he learns as he slowly approaches adulthood that this is not okay. So anyway, I want to say that I recognize the dilemma. By talking about these sorts of comments, I'm giving them a little bit of oxygen, but I do think it's valuable to respond to this point that this young fellow is trying to make. And that point seems to be this: prove your claims, Pat. It's easy to say things on the internet, but prove it. I think that's his point. And that gives me an opportunity to talk about how I approach facts versus opinions on this channel. I think people deserve to know how I think about this, because one of my core values is to tell the truth. And one of the main things I'm coming against are the lies and the fraudulence that Christians have to accept. They have to accept lies and fraudulence in order to support Trump and this MAGA version of the GOP. That's one of my main points. So here's what I'll say. I try to never say any facts on this channel that I can't prove. I do say a lot of opinions, but I hope it's clear when I'm stating an opinion versus a fact. And one way of me clearing this up is to respond to certain comments that come up where maybe I wasn't clear. I'm not sure this was one of those, but I think it would be helpful to clarify sometimes. When it comes to facts, I do try to quote sources as much as I can. Sometimes I'll just post a screenshot of an article that I read, or I'll name the publication, the New York Times or whatever, and I'll let people decide if they find those articles trustworthy or not. And right there, I know that I'm inviting a bunch of comments that are going to say, oh, right, the New York Times. So to that, I just have to say, yes, the New York Times, yes, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Atlantic Magazine, CNN. These are all credible news sources with a variety of editorial boards. And I'm not going to stop using them just because Donald Trump, the most willfully ignorant man in America, has taught his followers to dismiss the mainstream media. I also read a lot of independent media. So whether it's the mainstream media or independent media, I'm not happy with every editorial decision any of those sources might make. And I read things that are from a more conservative point of view and from a more liberal point of view or whatever. I read very broadly. So regarding the facts that I shared in this case, it's an example. I talked about the press conference the survivors held, and I shared a link to the press conference video, and I asked people to watch it for themselves. And I shared a couple images of articles that I read that talked about Trump's pressure campaign. Now, that pressure campaign reportedly was designed to keep Republicans from voting to release the files. But I say reportedly, but it's really not hard to prove, even without the articles, because Trump said all of that stuff out loud. He said it himself out loud. And this all relates to the way that I write my books, too. In my most recent book, I have a lot of quotes, and the vast majority are quotes from Donald Trump himself, because I'm not doing like conspiracy stuff on the internet. My point with Trump usually is that we don't need a conspiracy theory. His own words condemn him every day. So like 75% of my purpose here is just to point out what Trump is saying and doing in public. And then saying, hey, Christian Trump supporters, what the heck are you thinking? I mean, I've basically got a ministry here of stating the obvious and jimming the camera. And apparently someone needs to do that. So when someone says support your claims to me, it usually means they haven't watched the video or they've been told that this is somehow a winning argument. And honestly, if they come from the MAGA world, I think that can be a winning argument. This is projection because the entire MAGA movement is built on a foundation of lies. And I know people are going to want to both sides this, but it's not a both sides thing. There is falseness in every movement. There's falseness, I suppose, in every human, as much as we try not to be. But the MAGA movement is built on a foundation of lies that's very different than any other movement I've seen in my lifetime. So for somebody in the MAGA movement, support your claims might be the most frightening words that they can hear. But again, I'm not making a lot of claims here. I'm stating the obvious. And when in the office, if you've seen it, when Jim looks at the camera, he's not making a claim because the action is happening right there in front of everyone. He's just saying, are you seeing this? Can you believe it? And what's frustrating when I do that is that a whole lot of Trump supporters pretend that they're not seeing what we all know they're seeing. And they say things like, support your claims, and then they change the subject as fast as they can. So finally, that brings me to the main point that I made in that video. I did share a few true supportable statements about Donald Trump's past behavior. I said he was accused of one assault by a minor related to the Epstein case, but that the case was withdrawn. I mentioned that. I didn't even want to mention that because I knew that that's an explosive allegation that was withdrawn. But I did mention it for completeness, because if I didn't, then people would understandably be commenting and saying, why didn't you mention that? But I did mention it then and said the case was withdrawn and that I don't know enough about it to talk about it. That's kind of how I think about some of this stuff. Then I quoted some of Trump's own words, which are very well documented, in which he bragged about his ability to commit sexual transgressions. In one case, he said because he's a star, and in another case, because he owned a teen beauty pageant. So I was saying words that he had already said. I was paraphrasing things he had already said. So my point was, we've all seen enough to know who Donald Trump is in regard to these sorts of issues. And his own words support every claim that I made. I said, I don't know why he's covering up these files now, but he is covering them up. That's all true. All of that has happened out in the open. It just is. The only real claim, I think, that I made in the video that needs support is this one. The Christians who support Trump and his party are complicit in the cover-up. And I've spent years supporting that claim on so many levels, but for today, here's the clearest support that I can offer for that claim that the Christians who support Trump are complicit in his cover-up. The support for that today is when I tried to convince Trump supporters to care about this issue and to care about the victims, one of his supporters responded, "Oh, boo-hoo, prove your claims, get a life." I rest my case, and thanks for listening. Hey again, if you want to help grow this channel, we've got two ways to do that now. One is through memberships, and in the description below, you'll find a link to become a member of this channel. And membership has a few perks, like members-only live streams. And so if you have the means to do that, that's a financial way to help us create more videos on more topics with more creators. But liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment, those are all free. And it's your way above average engagement on this channel that's been causing YouTube to share these videos with so many new people. So paid memberships help us expand the content, more videos from more voices. But liking, subscribing, and commenting, that expands the audience itself. So thank you all for all the ways that you're helping to grow this channel.